Before America ends up with two nominees for president, each party holds an election process for their particular nominee. This is called a primary. So, for example, let's say the Democrat Party needs to nominate a candidate for president. John Smith, Tracy Jones, and Rick Johnson all want to be that candidate. So they will enter a primary process. During this process, each state holds an election process to vote for either John Smith, Tracy Jones, or Rick Johnson for the Democrat presidential nominee. How each state votes for that presidential nominee differs. Some states hold caucuses where different political groups throughout the state get together and pick a nominee. While the majority of states hold a traditional voting process where anyone who is registered in that particular party goes to the polls and votes for their particular candidate they want to represent their party for the presidential nominee. So, if I'm a part of the Democrat Party on my voter registration during the primary, if I live in a traditional primary voting state, I will go to the polls and vote for either John Smith, Tracy Jones, or Rick Johnson. In some states, such as Michigan, regardless of whether you're registered as a Republican, Democrat, or Independent, you can still vote in a primary. So if there's a Democrat primary going on and you are a Republican, you can still vote for who you want to become the Democrat nominee. Things run a bit different for the national election. When you vote for a presidential candidate, you are really voting to instruct the electors from your state to cast their votes for the same candidate. So for example, let's say you live in South Florida. Florida is a big state and has 29 electors, which means they have 29 electoral votes. So you go to the polls, cast your vote for John Smith. Let's say many people in South Florida voted for John Smith too. Well, after counting all the votes, one of the 29 electors that represents your area in South Florida will cast their electoral vote for John Smith because he's been voted the most in your area. Technically, the elector in your area doesn't necessarily have to cast their electoral vote for John Smith, but ethically, he or she should because the people voted for him the most. After all 29 electoral votes are added up, the candidate with the most electoral votes wins the popular vote, and all 29 electoral votes for, in this case, the state of Florida. So if John Smith wins 20 electoral votes in the state of Florida, he wins all 29 electoral votes and wins the state of Florida. The first candidate that gets to 270 electoral votes nationwide wins and becomes the President of the United States.